So this lesson we're starting to talk about decimals, fractions, ratios, and percents and how they are related. And I know that we've found a connection between ratios and fractions because we can write ratios as fractions, and we've discovered that. And we found a relationship between fractions and decimals already. We know that every fraction can be written as a decimal by dividing. And in this lesson, we're going to find a relationship between decimals and percents, as well as fractions and percents and ratios, because if they are related and one of them can relate to percents, then we can relate everything together. So let's talk about what a percent, fraction, ratio, and decimal are. So I'm going to give you an example of a problem that you might see. Mary has 100 acres of land with which she is planting two types of apples, Fuji and Macintosh. She would like to have 32 acres of Fuji. Shade the diagram and fill in the chart. So I'm going to start with shading the diagram. For the Fuji apples, I'm going to make them blue. And she wants 32 acres. So that's 10, 20, 30, and 2. Those are Fuji. Macintosh are going to be purple. So the rest of the farm must be Macintosh apples. So using this hundreds grid, I can model what the problem might look like. And if I come down here, we've got Macintosh and Fuji. I'm going to write that in here. Oops. Okay. And if I would like to write part to whole ratio, what that means is what part of the total 100 acres is Macintosh? Well, Fuji apples are a little easier to start with, so let's start with that. And in this one, I'm going to end up with 32 as my part and 100 as my whole, because 32 out of 100 are shaded. And if I do a little subtraction, or I can look back at, let's just look back at the chart. Macintosh, I have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and 8. So I have 68 acres of Macintosh out of 100 acres of Fuji. And since I know that they have the ratio set up, I can write these as fractions. So 68 over 100 and 32 over 100. And if I know that's what the ratio looks like as a fraction, I can also write this as a decimal simply by reading the fraction. Because the bottom, the denominator, is a power of 10, you can just read the fraction and write it. 68 100ths looks like this as a decimal. 68 ending in the hundredths place. And that says 68 hundredths. And 32 100ths, similar to that, looks like 0.32 or 32 ending in the hundredths place. 32 hundredths. And percent is literally just a ratio that means out of 100. So 68 out of 100 means 68% of the farm is Macintosh, and 32 out of 100 means 32% of the farm is Fuji. So once we know how to the basics and how to write ratios as fractions, decimals, and percents, we can move on and do a little bit of problem solving. So the next lesson that we're going to do, we're going to talk about how we can write them as a decimal fraction and percent. So this is lesson 25 now. And I wrote these in words, but let's convert them and see what they would look like. 9/20 looks like this. And the easiest way that I can tell you to convert a fraction to a percent is to make it out of 100, because percent literally means per 100. So I need to find an equivalent fraction where the denominator is 100. So equivalent fractions have this relationship where we can multiply by a number to get the other fraction, or divide. But 20 times 5 is 100, so 9 times 5 is 45. That means 9/20 is equivalent to 45 hundredths, And knowing what we know from yesterday, I can convert 45 hundredths to percent by writing the numerator, 45%. And for the next one, I have 3/10. Now, I can write that as 3/10, but I wrote it in a fraction form because I want to be able to make the denominator 100. And to get from 10 to 100, I multiply by 10. So 3 times 10 is 30. So it's 30 hundredths or 30%. Now, notice also that I could simply just go from the decimal by adding a placeholder 0, and now I can read 3/10 as 30 hundredths. They're equivalent to each other, but I can write that as 30%. Okay, for 11/20ths, again, denominator is 20. We want to make the denominator 100. I would multiply by 5, just like I did in the previous example. Multiply by 5, and I will get 55 out of 100, which is 55%. Now, there are many different kinds of diagrams we can use, and the hundreds chart is one of them. And if for each 20, for every 2 rows, I only shade 11, I could go through and I could shade it and count up how many are shaded and then write the percent from that. So sometimes that might be a valid method for solving it. You can also do a tape diagram. And if I want to cut a tape diagram into 20ths, and I think of the whole as 100%, then we can figure out how much each box is worth. And just for a hint, if I take 100 and split it into 20ths, each box of my tape diagram is worth 5. And 11 times 5 is 55. All right, 5/8. This is a special case. There is no number, well, there is a number, but it's not a nice even number, that I can multiply by 8 to give me 100. So therefore, my method falls a little short. But we know that any time I write a fraction, it can be written as a decimal. And that's something that we learned last year. So I'm going to go over to the side, and I'm going to do 5 divided by 8. Now I can't do this, but if I add the decimal and the 0, it helps me a little bit. 8 goes into 50. In fact, we're going to need more space. 8 goes into 50 6 times, because 8 times 6 is 48. I get 2 left over. Now, since it didn't end up evenly, I'm going to add another 0, bring down a 20. Bring down the 0, make it a 20. And 8 goes into 20 2 times. 8 times 2 is 16, and I get 4 left over. And if I add another 0, make it 40, 8 goes nice and evenly into 45 times. So I know that 5 divided by 8, or 5/8, is equal to 0.625, or 600 or 600, oh, come on, 625 thousandths. Problem is, I want it to be 100ths. So to get from thousands to 100ths, I can divide by 10. So dividing this by 10, I will get 62.5. Now the tricky part here is that I don't normally see decimals and fractions in the same number. And in fact, it's kind of what we call a complex fraction. But if we can do this, we can make it work. And then this is 62.5%. And let me show you what this looks like in a tape diagram. If I split up something into 8s, okay, so there's my tape diagram, split up into 8s. 1/8 of 100 is not something we can do. But we can find 2/8 of 100 and 2/8 of 100. or a fourth of 100 is 25. 3/8 of 100, again, we can't do, but 4/8 of 100 is half, and half of 100 is 50. And then again, 5/8 of 100, which is what we're looking for, isn't even, but 6/8 would be 75. And if I look for the number that's halfway between 50 and 75, I should get 62.5. So you can see it numerically, but it is confusing when we want to go ahead and divide. All right, last one, a little easier than number 4, is 7 out of 10. And if I have 7 out of 10, I want to make it out of 100. I'm multiplying by 10, so it would be 70%. And again, we can write this as 7/10 or 70 hundredths, which would be 70%.